everybody. It's Duchess Bobby from Nerds That Know. I'm here with some of the creative team from Meow Wolf. Now, these are people who are going to be working with Santa Fe, Denver, Texas, Las Vegas. They work for the whole organization, but I believe most of us, most of the team that we're going to be talking to today is out of Santa Fe. Just one or two of us here in Denver. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and let the Meow Wolf creative team introduce themselves.
I'll go first since I'm by myself. You guys can fight later. I'm Michael Wilson. I'm the senior story editor, and I've been with Meow Wolf for about 5 years. And I've worked on all of our exhibits past the house. So that's me.
Awesome.
I'm Julianne Aguilar. I am a story lead on our story team. Been with Meow Wolf 5-ish years, and I have also worked on everything after the house.
And I'm James Longmire. I work on the story team with these wonderful folks. I'm the story development director, and I've worked with Meow Wolf full-time since 2017 and freelanced for like a year and a half, 2 years before that. So I worked on the house in ways. I worked on exhibition content for the house.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. I was saying a little bit before we started, I've actually been to, well, I haven't been to Texas yet, but I've been to the house in Santa Fe. I've been to Omega Mart. And obviously Convergence Station a lot because that's my local. I first learned about Meow Wolf through Burning Man. I went to the Burn, like years ago, like 2015, 2016, something like that. And they were like, "Oh my God, you know what's happening?" And there's a dryer, you can crawl inside. That was the big one. Everybody was super excited about the dryer you get to go into.
There's also a washer in Grapevine now, so we're really branching out.
Yeah,
see?
We're innovating. New appliances, yeah.
Someday we'll have all the appliances.
Maybe not the oven.
Well,
that's a bad example, but
oh yeah.
But there's a refrigerator in Denver.
Yeah.
That you can hang out, and it's a nice quiet space. I do love the quiet rooms that are part of Convergence Station. Like when my mother-in-law has gone with us to Meow Wolf, all of the twice, once in Santa Fe and once in Denver, she's needed to have that quiet, that calm, because she gets super overwhelmed and overloaded.
So do we.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Spaces too.
Yeah, there's so much there. The only problem with the quiet spaces is they echo really lovely. And my husband enjoys making the Chewbacca noise when we're in there. He does it so well. My nephew just eats it up, but it does reverberate in those spaces.
That's delightful.
So,
we practice that in all of our exhibits just to make sure.
Well, see, you can use him as an official tester. Make sure your rooms have the right echo, sound balance. Okay, so you guys have all worked on the stories. Omega Mart, I think, is a really fun story. Just all of the behind the scenes stuff. So many people only know the grocery storefront, and they don't realize that's such a small piece of the whole Vegas experience. So Julianne and Michael, since you didn't work on the house, let's go ahead and start there. And then James, I'll probably pick your brain a little bit on some of the house stuff. How did you guys come up with that whole storyline?
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of the ways that this happens with many of our exhibits is that we start planning the physical nature of the space first. So Omega Mart had been a thing that we did here in Santa Fe. Do you remember what year that was?
2012.
2012. Yeah. So there was like a tiny Omega Mart in like a strip mall here in Santa Fe. So the idea had been percolating for several years. And kind of the creative brain behind that project is Emily Montoya. And she had come up with this idea of the family that is behind the brand of Omega Bars. So she kind of came to our team and said, like, here's my idea of this, like, this crazy family that runs this company. What do you got?
Yeah. And that was also a time when, Meow Wolf had a history of doing narrative things. Like we did, the Do Return existed in the house, but this was the first sort of stab at attempting to do something like the house a second time. And so we really kind of made it up as we went. And it was a lot of sitting in rooms together, throwing things at the wall until we agreed on what was the coolest.
Yep. Yep. And we knew that we wanted the story to be funny. We wanted to play with family dynamics. I think we were really drawn to the idea of this family that is very kooky. They have a lot of kooky personalities. There are a lot of competing interests amongst all of these family members. And we kind of just ran with that. I was really inspired by Elizabeth Holmes. She was kind of going down in a blaze of glory at that point, and I was like, Cecilia Dram is my Elizabeth Holmes. I just want, like, I'm very, very attracted to very ambitious con women. It's my favorite subgenre of person. So I was like, all right, we have this character, Cecilia. Let's see what we can do with her. We had a very talented writer on our team at that time named Kimberly Bellflower, who really built out Marin as this teenage girl, very robust in her life, and really wrote her story in a beautiful way. And Michael, you had your hands in everything with Vegas.
It's interesting. During Vegas, I was the narrative team's production manager. So,
wow.
I basically helped keep the train running for Vegas. It was like, and I was basically the wall between the creative folk and who were doing all the writing and all the production stuff. So budgets and timelines and things, as I knew all that stuff so that other people could write. It was a really intense time. It got only more intense post-pandemic.
I can imagine.
But it was interesting. That story was really cool because it started as this idea of, and in a lot of ways, I'm hesitant to say the story was sort of a parody of the Walmarts of the world or things like that, but it kind of started as this very big sort of global concept of a company being ran by a family. And then we started drilling down and not to be serious about it because but at the core of the story is this generational thing, a father treats his daughter poorly, that daughter who then treats her daughter poorly, and how that sort of spins out. And in a lot of ways, the story of Omega Mart is not to make it sound really serious, but that story ultimately is about how generational trauma affects everyone around you. And obviously we blow it to a scale that's kind of insane, but and ridiculous.
It's comic. Yeah, it's funny, but I think at the heart of a lot of our stories, there's a little bit of darkness that comes out pretty overtly in the House of Eternal Return, where the story literally revolves around a child who has just died. And we have found that a lot of our fans appreciate that. They like seeing these kind of dark themes in our stories because everyone has experienced this thing. People have experienced loss. People have experienced, broken, dysfunctional families. A lot of people relate to Marin because everyone's been 16. If you're over the age of 16, you can remember what it was like being a teenager who doesn't really get along with your parents, who might want to leave town, but you can't. Is looking for, trying to find yourself, trying to figure out who you are. So even though we do write these absurd things, they really do come from the heart. They come from, these themes that I think are really important to us that you might not expect when you're just looking at this wacky grocery store, with spray bottles that are shaped like brontosauruses.
We use all the wackiness as a gateway drug to show you something a little more real in there.
100%.
I think it's a good balance. Funny and drama go side by side. So
one of the things I really, really appreciate about all three of the ones that I've been to here, well, I guess technically four, because there's the ride at Elitch Gardens.
Yeah.
Because I've done that a couple times too. Is the fact that you have all of this crazy, you have all of this color, but there's so much more to it. So if you want to, you can just scratch the surface and be like, oh yeah, this stuff is cool. But if you want to, you can also go deep and be like, okay, this is why this is here, and this is what happens next, and become part of the story.
Yeah, and people
Yeah.
do. I'm always surprised when we'll sneak in something really small and people find it really quickly, and they're talking about it on Reddit and Discord.
Yeah, that does not surprise me at all. We actually have a Discord channel just for our Meow Wolf group here in Denver.
Oh, nice.
And we all chat about different things. The fish puzzle is a big one because every time we go in, one of the devices in there is not working.
It's part of the
And
experience. Is this a
Yeah.
puzzle
Done on
too?
purpose.
Yeah.
so it's one of those like, we think we know the answer, but we can't actually make it happen.
Oh,
But you know what? That's okay. There's also like in Convergence Station, there's the slime on the wall that you
Mhm.
can move that we
Yeah.
haven't figured out. No
Oh.
idea how to freaking do that,
you know,
but it's cool.
yeah.
There's a
We love the
long
slime.
epic drama of the
Yeah.
slime.
Yeah,
We
such
love
a
the slime,
such a
but-
seemingly small thing had a lot of backstory.
Yeah.
within
Oh
there.
yeah,
So-
and a lot of discussion.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
pre-install, my desk actually I stared at a slime for months before they were installed. I got to stare at slimes. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, the building that the story team was in at the time shared a space with like a warehouse where some build out was happening, which is really cool. But we got to see things before they went into the exhibit. One of my favorite was actually part of Kaleidoscape. We were reskinning the animatronic that is now in Kaleidoscape MLGAM. And his like old skin was just like in a trash can in our warehouse, which was really exciting. And before it was Kaleidoscape, it was a dark ride. Oh man, I can't remember what it was originally called.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, so there was like
Ghostbusters.
there are all of these ghosts in our warehouse, including like there was like a skeleton hand that was just like sticking out of a different trash can for weeks. It was a really special place to be in during that year or two that we were there.
Yeah, it's very cool. We have season passes to Elitch's, and we'll sometimes go just to do Kaleidoscape and then leave.
Oh, I haven't even done Kaleidoscape.
I haven't either.
We need
You
to go.
should. It's so cool.
We're gonna go to Kaleidoscape and we're gonna go to Casa Bonita. It's gonna happen.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah. My nephew, who is 9, loves Kaleidoscape. It's one of his favorites.
Oh yay!
So,
Yeah, I actually got to work on that project, and it was really fun watching it come together.
well, that's, I think, one of the best things about Meow Wolf. And again, going back to the whole Burning Man, where I learned about everything here, is it's so collaborative, it's so community based, and it's something for everyone. Like I've seen little kids there, I've seen like senior citizens, everybody, there's something for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things when I first started, I was reading through a lot of our Google reviews. And the thing that I saw over and over was it made me feel like a kid again. And that's something I really latched onto. It's something that I don't ever want us to lose sight of, is that we pack a lot of story in here, but they're also physical experiences. And I think the experiences of walking into a house that doesn't really seem right, or a grocery store that doesn't really seem right, or like a transit station where something is just a little bit off, will catch you just off guard enough that I think you're willing to drop your own guard and like experience the space in a way that you might not feel free to experience otherwise, whether you're 8 or 80. So definitely something that I think is special about our spaces.
Giving people permission to play, I think, is
Exactly.
something that and because I wouldn't say that we necessarily think when we go to make an exhibit, when we go to make a story, when we go to install things, we're not necessarily thinking about like, will this appeal to an 8-year-old? Will this appeal to an 80-year-old? But by virtue of giving space, that is just permission to run around and look at cool things and experience lights and sounds and just have that permission to just let go and be absorbed by the chaos, I think just naturally means people of all ages are gravitate toward it. Because we love to have permission to just relax and have fun, like, we don't have enough of that in the world. So like, I think us allowing you to have that space is really wonderful.
Yep.
I feel like at its best too, when we're creating and in the development process, like we're trying to lean into that energy as well. And like,
Yeah.
I feel like Meow Wolf at its best, like decisions kind of get made by like proxy of like the excitement meter in the room. Like there are obviously, sometimes moments where someone has to like just make a call and not everyone likes it, but we really, as much as possible, try to like lean into like what are we most collectively excited about exploring right now. Yeah, I don't know, and that just kind of makes it a magical place to work too, where it's like,
Totally.
I don't know, never a dull moment.
No, and I feel like that kind of naturally leads into like where our heads were at when we were working on Denver, because unlike Vegas, Vegas is this one tight story, and Denver got to be this a convergence of 5 stories. Yeah, and just I feel like lots of different brains and moods and just like minds went into that, and it got to go in much wilder directions than we got to do in Vegas.
Yeah, and we basically got to tell, I mean, it's not really necessarily an anthology, but it's essentially like a collection of short stories with connected issue, and then together the stories have this larger story. And it was actually really interesting. That process was really cool. For Denver, I was originally a story lead for C Street, and Julianne was a story lead for EMEA. And we approached each of the worlds as as like its own development. So each world has its own story, and then we kind of came together and created all the connections, and then the overarching big story came sort of at the end, which is maybe a little backwards feeling, but also like ended up with like this each of the worlds is very rich as a result.
Yeah, I definitely agree that each level, each room even has its own bit. Like my favorite place in Convergence Station is the music area with all of the street signs, and like it's so cool. And you have that whole area with like the local Denver artists. So I love that. That's my favorite place.
Yeah, are you talking about the space by the yacht boat?
Gremlin Symphony.
Yeah, Gremlin Symphony is the name, and that's my favorite thing we've ever done, actually. And it's so cool. It is you don't get a sense of how loud it is until you've shared a workspace with it months at a time, and at a certain point it's just like, I need to get out of here. And so like we were sharing a space with that object, and it's huge. Again, it's like now on a ceiling, so you don't get a real scale of how absolutely physically huge it is, but it is huge and it is loud. And it really took me seeing it installed in the space to think like, this is the coolest thing we've ever done. It's like, it's so beautiful. The workmanship and like musical genius that went into making that piece just is astounding. And I don't know if we've topped it.
One of my favorite Gremlin Symphony like secrets is that it's playable. You can plug in and play Gremlin Symphony, and you can play music off it. There's an amazing, I think it's on Instagram. There's an amazing video of Reggie Watts playing using a keyboard to play Gremlin Symphony. It's one of my
Reggie Watts and the Yelp. Yeah, the Yelp makes a whole cameo.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Yelp's like dancing in the background. Yes, but that space is really cool. It's funny, I really enjoy that room, and there is something really funny about having to sit. I now have that xylophone melodies like locked in my brain due to listening to months. But there's something kind of cool about the juxtaposition between that sort of like cacophony of almost like garbage tornado-y space that plays music, and then there's a boat right there that you can sit on a chair and like just stare into space. One of my favorite things during production was that the Yelp boat sat in our production studio for months, and you could just go sit on the deck of the boat. And I used to sit on the deck doing my work. That space is really cool. And that's one of our deeper lore spaces, that the work that went into the Yelp boat. It's considered a flex project, which I don't want to get too weedy about what that means, but basically it means a group of artists takes an idea, sees it to the end. But it happened to fall into this lore category of story building, where we created this, creature, and who is essentially has like intense social anxiety.
Mhm.
And then this group of people has a boat that they have sort of driven into Convergence to try to come find the Yelp in appreciation of this sort of cryptid character. It's one of my favorite, like, weird, not necessarily tied to the lore of the full exhibit, but this nice little side story that we tell. And one of my favorite things about working at Meow is, we're a very much yes and company. So if you want to tell a side story like the story of the Yelp, if we can find room for it in an exhibit, it's going to happen. And then there can be this like nice little story about this other little character who then goes on to be one of the more beloved characters in the exhibit.
Well, I
Yeah,
love the attention to
also,
detail, like the tiny things that like you may not notice the first couple of times you go in, just going off the boat, like the names of the DVDs, right, that are in the room, right?
The
And
romance novels, the artwork is insane in there.
right, it's all of the detail stuff. The library space is my niece's favorite room. She's 26. And whenever we go, like that's where she wants to go and look through the books. And as much as I love it, it does bother me that some books had to die to make it. But
some
but I
books were hurt
understand,
for sure.
and it's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel any better, we bought a dump truck full of books that were going to go to a landfill, and that's how that got made.
That actually does make me feel a lot better.
Out of
So
the landfill.
they weren't books that anyone was doing anything with.
Claiming
They were
trash.
going to go and not be loved or seen ever again, and you gave them a place of honor.
Yeah, we
So
built a nook out of them.
I love that nook. I have taken so many pictures hanging out in that space. Like it's crazy. And every time I go, I find a different title.
Nice. Yeah, it's also
So
like this is like a deep diver nugget of Convergence Station, but like there's a lot of love for trash specifically in Convergence Station.
yes.
From the books that we saved on their way to the landfill to the Yelp basically subsists and makes small art projects out of trash, which I've always seen as like a little bit of a shout out to Meowwolf's origins of
Totally.
creating art exhibits out of trash.
Literal,
Absolutely.
out of literal trash.
Literally out of trash.
Well, even it goes down even to like, I mean, Gremlin Symphony, a lot of that sort of looks like garbage, and there is sort of like a garbage thing to it. But like in the space that we all call Rat's Nest, which is the Undermauler zone where there's a vending machine that talks to you and you can do the little rat fight. The entire couch
Right.
is made out of like, essentially, I mean, it's not shrink wrapped, but it's plastic wrapped trash. It's a couch that is
Yeah.
plastic molded around literal discarded items. So like it is sort of like an interesting reoccurring theme, and that even shows up in the lore of C Street itself. C Street was the sanitation district for the planet that used to be on before Convergence happened. So like there is sort of an interesting like reoccurring theme of like garbage repurposed into not garbage within the exhibit.
Well, yeah, and then you guys have the trash and show, which is awesome. The different looks that people come up with for the trash and show is just crazy.
Yeah, we love
And
the
that's a good example of just like our our ops teams, our operations teams at our exhibits. I just want to give them a huge amount of love right now because that they take what we do. We spend 3 to 4 years thinking about this, and then we kind of unleash it into the world. But that team, those ops teams, really take what we did and make it breathe. And that's a good example. That's Kate Major, who does all the wardrobe for Convergence Station. Just running with what ultimately was a goofy idea we had. Like we had a goofy idea one day where it's like, wouldn't it be funny if there was like a fashion show, or wouldn't it be funny if like X, Y, and Z happened. It wouldn't be, you know, like, and we come up with this silly idea and then they make them into something that just resonates beyond that idea, which is really wonderful to see. It makes me really happy to watch what happens once that team gets a hold of what we do.
Yeah, they're all wonderful.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really love about Convergent Station is the number of people who are, part of your operations team who are in there, who are interacting with everybody. The monks, for lack of a better term, over by the cathedral, and then there's this whole discussion about the whales stuck under the ice. And it's a whole thing, like they're just people standing there making whale sounds. And they're just like, we have to save them. My husband is one of those people.
That really warms my heart. So I wrote that story, and
oh well, it's my husband's like favorite thing. He always has to yell to the whales and like tap on the floor.
That warms my heart. Fun fact: the reason that there are even whales in that story to begin with was because there was supposed to be a full-sized whale in that space. it actually, for a number of practical and good reasons, it got cut. And I was like, I am not taking the whales out of this story. They are there. I'm not redoing that work.
Save the whales.
Save the whales. We're going to save the whales. So the whales ended up becoming a big part of the story, ironically, because the whale itself never made an appearance.
Yeah. But it's a good example, I think, of like how through production, like I said, our exhibits, it takes us up to about 4 years is, the right number. That's how long both Vegas and Denver took. It just shows you how concepts evolve through that process, because we kind of, we know what we're doing to a degree, but we allow things to naturally evolve. That includes artworks, things in exhibits, and story. But then also, we have the practical things, and I don't want to be like boring about it, but like money, and fire code and things like that show up at some point, and we have to
the fire code.
Finger and trap.
We have to respond. And I will be honest, fire code is like honestly the thing we respond to the most. Like, the whale wasn't a victim of fire codes, but like other things in our projects are. And if something has to go away, we have to be nimble enough to change it in the story as well. Or
I have a secret, Michael. The whale was a victim of the fire code.
The whale was a victim.
Ironic.
Nice. I probably just mind wiped that. I was like, it's too much of that.
I was in those rooms, and I was just like, I'm not getting rid of my whales.
No, but it's a good example of like the whales got to live on in a different
physical form.
Yeah.
they have lived on.
Yeah, they are definitely a big part of that space.
Mm-hmm.
What I really appreciate about Meow as an overarching is that everything is interconnected. You can find things in Convergent Station that take you back to the house. You can find things at a Mega Mart, and all of this, and they're all, even though they're all individual stories, they're all connected in some way. Like the missing hamster signs that are up on the walls, and just little things like that. Like, I love the way it's so cohesive with still being unique.
Yeah, I think Nimsescu forever. We all love Nimsescu.
We all love Nimsescu. Yeah, we're obsessed.
The hamster will be in every exhibit till the end of time, just because we all love the hamster. But I think,
well, yeah,
I think that's also a reflection of like, we have a very deep story and a deep lore that everything is. I'm glad to hear that it's seen, because there's so much more connectivity behind the scenes that we're just waiting to unveil. And something that's really cool about the dual exhibits in Texas of the Grapevine Houston exhibits is that it's given us a chance to kind of sort of showcase kind of like that reflection in a very overt way. There's going to be 2 exhibits relatively close to each other that come out, boom, boom, one after another, year back to back. And that gave us a chance to sort of show those connections in a more concrete way. And I'm really excited for the future development too, because this is kind of, I've been thinking of this lately as everything we've done up to now has been kind of the prologue. This has been the prelude to the big story. There's a
oh
big
my goodness.
and our first 3 exhibits were really laying some foundations in a lot of ways. We were putting the players on the table, putting some concepts on the table, introducing some characters, and Now I think we're at a place where we're ready to sort of like really go all in on those connections and, you know, start showing off that deeper connectivity and the deeper lore. And I can't wait for, you know, Houston to open and then all the stuff past that to happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, James, your brain has really been on the like the past that lore and how
Yeah.
that's shaping up. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I don't know what
I don't know what we can say.
I don't know what we could say. Be as vague as you possibly can and just
This is
cover
going to be a
your mouth like
tightrope
this.
walk. But what I will say in incredible vagueness is that like we are really excited about further connecting our existing stories with our future stories, but also like I don't know, like charting new territory in terms of how we forge those connections.
Yep.
Which it sounds very vague, but I don't know if I could go more specific than that. But yeah, and I don't know. I think there are surprises that we find in the creative process as we're developing shows. There are also surprises that we find once a show is, you know, out in the wild and people are interacting with it, and what characters are they really responding to, what storylines do they want more of, and some of those things we anticipate, but there are surprises that we find in there. And then as you know, Michael, you mentioned like our creative operators become such a collaborator in terms of how the story evolves, because it's not done once the show opens. That's like the first chapter, but it's
not in our hearts either, because we get attached to these characters. And like I haven't stopped thinking about any of my characters from Vegas or Denver, and I want them to come back. And you know, sometimes our fans just become so attached to sort of like, our fans love Marin. Like they just want to know what happened to Marin. It's like, I want to know too. We want to know too. And you know, like we notice these things, like we hear what fans are talking about, and we do take that under consideration, because 9 times out of 10 we have the same obsessions.
Yeah.
So I do know that we're kind of given you know, almost done with our time. So before we go, you've said so much. I've been taking notes because this is so freaking awesome. But Julian, you said that the Gremlin Symphony is your favorite, and that the whales were like really important to you. So Michael and James, what would you say your favorite that you've worked on are?
Okay. This is a hard question because I have I have a favorite in every exhibit. So I have a favorite thing in each exhibit. And oftentimes my favorite thing is not a thing I worked on, mainly because I get excited about what I see here at work. Like I love seeing the weird stuff that everyone comes up with. I feel very close to the Vegas exhibit because during the height of the pandemic, I installed that exhibit. I was the only, you know, several people from the story team got to go, but I was there for a full 2 months during install, and I physically put every poster up on the wall. I physically installed most of the narrative deliverables in that exhibit myself, due to just like no one else being able to come because it was pre-vaccines. My favorite, so as a result of that, my answer is kind of biased. Like my favorite room in Vegas is the foreman's office. That is a room that I basically got to design, art direct, and execute. And that is a room that I fully installed, and I got to direct what went in. And it is, so as a result, it's my favorite room. It's the room I got to make. So that would be my answer always, I think. I have an answer like that for every exhibit though, but that's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna cheat. So in Denver, I worked very closely on the animations for the Forgotten Four, those memories, and it was kind of a thing where it's like COVID hit, we could only do so much live action production to keep people safe, and so there was a little bit of a creative pivot of like, how do we tell the story that has such like high creative ambition in the like throes of the pandemic. And those animations were our answer. We worked with really incredible directing team, Jason Carpenter and Elise Kelly, who they pulled together a group of, I think, like 50 different animators from around the country to give each of these animations its own look. But I'm cheating, and I'm also saying something in Vegas that I really, well, a content part in, but Marin's hut, Marin
Yeah.
and Rose's dwelling
Mhm.
that they live in is just such a special place. And I really think it's a high bar for us in terms of set dressing, physical
Mhm.
narrative, printed narrative, working in a space where we also have a amazing piece of content
Yeah,
written
that
by
video is.
Kimberly Bellflower in collaboration with Beach House, this music video, Marin's Dreams, that plays behind Marin's
We should
vanity.
shout out Sarah Bradley, who is the creative director on that
Yep.
space.
Thank you, Mike.
Sarah, she was the senior creative director for the Grapevine exhibit as well, but she helped creative direct that room in Vegas. And, you know, the intimacy in that room. You're totally right, James. Like you walk in and you feel like someone lives there. It's a beautiful space. I will say, like, it's probably for me, like it is one of the heights of just like what we can do with like when our story, art direction, and a space meet. It is probably the high watermark for just like story in a space. You know, that
Yeah.
room is just dripping with story.
Yeah.
Down to like we picked out every book
We did.
individually,
I mean,
like
that's shout
on
out to
those
Sarah for
shelves.
like trusting us to do that. I mean, she was like, you know, what do you think your characters are reading? What are they wearing? What's on their shelves?
Yep.
Like what movies are they into? It's like, well, obviously, like the monolithists love the movie Hackers. I mean, I
Yes.
love the movie Hackers. And like, what is Marin like? Marin loves pink. You know, she loves glitter. Like she has glitter dreams. Of course, she's going to surround herself with this like very feminine aesthetic. And like you know, I think our creative team, our creative direction team does put a lot of trust in us to like develop out these stories and develop out these characters. And that's why we get so attached to them. Because like we got to pick out what Marin wears. It's like these little details really make our characters feel real.
And I think that's felt with the guests. I think part of why, you know, you respond to spaces. I think part of why that space is felt like another good example is you mentioned earlier the library, you know, and how much your niece really loves that space. You know, that is another space where I think we got to very intentfully build out like what was in that room. And I think that attention to detail and you know, it's felt, you know, the love that we put into it is felt. And a big thing that's important for us, and this goes for all of the teams at Meow Wolf, the visual artists, the you know, the filmmakers, the audio makers, everybody, is like we want you to feel the fingerprints. We want you to feel the artist in the work. So we want to show the rough edges. We want you to feel that love. And, you know, sometimes that means things are maybe a little less polished is sometimes what that means. Sometimes you can literally see fingerprints. And then sometimes it just means like we go all in. Like the Marin's Dreams video is a good example of like we had a budget for Vegas content and we spent a huge amount of it on this one video because we knew it was going to be like a high level mark. And like in
I mean,
Denver,
the
you know,
screenplay was just so good. It's like we obviously have to put in like the resources to make this great.
And shout out to director West, amazing
Mhm.
local Santa Fe director. Yeah, who's killing it in the film world here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't like give love to Matt King, who was the creative director for the EMEA space, and put his total trust in me, someone that he had known for all of 5 minutes when I started this job, to develop this story. And like at every step of the way, he was so kind and generous and graceful and defensive of the story that I had written. And I will always feel infinitely grateful to him and his genius for seeing that through.
Yeah.
Right. So as much as I want us to keep going, because I feel like we could just go down this rabbit hole for hours, we are going to be wrapping up. So we've mentioned that Meow Wolf has a YouTube channel, Reddit, Discord. Can somebody help me out here and give us where we can find you guys and make our own comments heard on your social medias?
So we have, so Meow Wolf, the company, has a ton of social medias. So it's at Meow_wolf, I believe, on
Two
Instagram.
underscores.
Two
God,
underscores.
never
Oh my
did that.
gosh, you're right. It's two underscores. It's Meow_wolf on Instagram. That's our main one. And then each of the exhibits, there is a Convergent Station Instagram. There's a Grapevine Instagram. It's the Real Unreal. There is an Omega Mart Instagram. And then, there are other adjacent Instagrams from there. So I will say, like, company-wide, there's like a ton of like things like that. And then there's a lot of websites. So that's what I'll say to those. And personally, I don't do anything exciting on social media. So, I'm not going to necessarily give those.
If you look
You
for
can
us,
find us.
yeah, you can find us.
But you can find us really easy on social media, and we sometimes do post about work. Yeah, the main one is the Meow Wolf one. And yeah.
The other thing I was going to add, if you're ever curious about who is involved with any Meow project,
yeah.
check out the credits website, which
I think it's credits.meowwolf.com.
It is.
that's it.
All right,
And
nailed
what's
it.
nice about
Thank you.
And we'll put all of these links in the description below, so that way you guys can all find what you're looking for. Click on these links, follow Meow Wolf, follow what's happening with the storyline. Apparently a lot more is coming, and that is just great to know and completely unfair because I have questions.
We have
We can
some
offline. We can
really,
answer some of
really
those. We might be able to answer some of those questions offline, as long as it doesn't go on the video.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there because I want to experience it for the first time. Because I feel like that's really one of the beautiful things about going into Meow Wolf, is every time you go in, you're there for the first time.
Totally.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Well,
Yeah, thank you
thank
so
you
much.
all so much. This has been absolutely incredible. Follow us on all of our social medias, Nerds That Know, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, and I think that's it. But we're Nerds That Know on all of the things. Okay, thank you guys so much. And
Bobby.
okay, we're done.